Welcome to another great episode of Royal, Black, and Elite. I'm your social historian and lecturer, Lady Trinette Wilson. Here I am dressed in an outfit from the 1800s as I visit a library to do an interview. I want to thank the DeSoto Public Library and I want to thank you for joining us each week as we talk about the royal, the black, and elite, and black culture. As we prepare for Black History Month, remember, hit me down. I left my information down at the bottom. If you'd like me to come speak, you want to do an interview, or do a lecture with your virtual audience. We have to bring Black history alive, and it's always my pleasure and my honor to do so. So thank you, thank you, thank you for everyone. Oh my goodness. Have you seen the subscriptions? They are growing well beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. As always, thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Over here, we learn about Black history from a different side. We know the oppression piece, but now we're learning about the elite piece. And over the last 2 months, I've really been only doing this for 2 months, but I've been doing it as a profession really for a lifetime. It is just an honor to see so many smart, intelligent, and engaged people of all races who come to learn about what we teach here. So thank you so much. And today is no different as we travel to the island of Jamaica. My family actually, and many of us who came from, the history of slavery, came from these islands. And so Jamaica is where we're going to be. And we're going to meet a Jamaican woman who married an Irish man, and together they became a voice, only to be snuffed out way, way too soon. Our Black history is everywhere, all around the world. And I want you to be the smartest audience in this conversation when we talk about Black history and knowing what's happening. So please join me today as we meet Catherine Despard. Now, this is not a picture of her, but this is a likeness of what the women looked like in Jamaica at that time. Now, unlike the picturesque beauty that we see today, as we travel back in time, and boy, that looks good. Jamaica's a beautiful vacation spot if you ever get a chance to go, but it didn't always look like that, and it wasn't always an independent country. There was a lot of slavery there, and it was a British colony, and you had plantations there, mostly sugar plantations, but there was this large contingent of mulattoes. So you had the enslaved there, but you had the plantation owners who would often have relationships with the enslaved women. And sometimes they weren't relationships, sometimes they were actually violated. And so this is where we find the home of Catherine Despard. This is where she was born in Kingston, Jamaica. And what's different about Catherine during this time, we don't know what her exact date of birth is, but we know she passed away in 1815. So during this time when she was growing up and young, we know that she wasn't a slave because her mother was a free woman. And her mom actually left Catherine some slaves when she died. And just a little bit about that. When Black people owned slaves for two main reasons. One, they had to buy their family members, or number two, they were left them by their parents or their slave owners they were in a relationship with, or they had children by. So that's how a lot of the Black wealth happened in these places. I also want to point out these pictures that you're seeing is a depiction of a famous painter. His name is Agostino Bunias, and he painted what many of the women look like during the time. So look at all these beautiful shades of brown and black and mocha. It's just a beautiful depiction that he did there. So his name again was Agostino. So here she was growing up in Kingston, Jamaica, and by the name, her mother's name was Sarah Gordon, and she met an Irish lieutenant. Meet Edward Despard. Now, Edward's story is really, Catherine's story is Edward's story. It is truly astounding what happened to this couple. So let's start from their relationship. They met. He was actually in Jamaica. He was in the British Army, and he was stationed in Jamaica. So he was responsible for divvying up land, and the local loggers got upset because he was distributing it to everyone instead of just to them. And also, besides giving out land equally, he also belonged to two organizations that raised eyebrows for them. One called the United Irishmen, and the other one called the London Correspondent Society. And during this time, free speech was being greatly oppressed. They were passing laws, all kinds of things. So through his work and through him being in the military, he had met people. He was married to a black woman, so he had real progressive ways of thinking around race. He even worked with Aquino in 1770s. Aquino was a well-renowned writer and an abolitionist. I'll do a video on him, but they really were very upset. So they were called back to England because there were some problems. The people were complaining. They were mad. They wanted that land. And so he and Catherine, they rode back to England and showed up to the court. And when he showed up, he had to go meet Lord William Grenville. And he was the minister of the United Kingdom during that time in 1790. Now, Despard brought Catherine, and by now they had a little boy named James. And it's so, disappointing because there are no pictures of these people other than Despard. But here you have James. They showed up to the court, and he didn't get arrested right then, but he did get stripped of his position, and he was already starting to face trouble from giving out that land. These slave holding loggers were suing him, so the debts kept rising. The debts kept rising, and they put him in jail, into debtor's prison, for not being able to pay his bills. Now, this is when Catherine swung into motion. She began to write letters. She began to talk about, the how they were treating him, and he was held in King's Bench prison for 2 years without even being charged. They finally let him go after all her writing letters and all of that. But the government arrested him again in 1798 for his membership in those organizations I had mentioned, and because they had suspended the right of habeas corpus during wartime. And at that time, they were in war. Now, Catherine was always fearless during her husband's incarceration. She kept writing letters and giving speeches. And in fact, what they did to her husband caused a 3-week debate in the House of Commons, where her letters were read aloud. She spoke of the deplorable conditions her husband and other prisoners faced, but he still remained in prison for 3 years. And he finally was released in May 1801. So him and Catherine, they hightailed to Ireland. And they were still speaking up, but Despard was linked to a plot to end the life of King George III. Now, that was the king who had mental problems. These claims changed their life forever. In what was called the Despard plot, he was linked to other conspirators who were planning to do something to King George. Now, he denied it profusely. These were people who were meeting because they were upset about housing, jobs, and that sort of thing. But they used this as a way to really silence him. And, Catherine continued to lobby on behalf of her husband, but it was really lost even before it started. The contemporaries of her time said that it was so heartbreaking during that time because they were going to draw and court her husband. And Catherine was repeatedly greatly stressed and depressed at the potential of her husband's fate. In 1795, the British government, passed a law called the Gagging Act, and they forbid people to meet to dissent from the government. In 1799 and in 1800, they did it again, and they passed a law called the Combination Law, which further hindered workers. We're still fighting that battle as a world today. People try to keep your voice down, and unfortunately, these people use the law in order to arrest him. I believe this is a powerful example because it really demonstrates the damage of out of control government and what they can do if they believe that you're doing something wrong or saying something wrong. And it wasn't about black or white, they were all at risk. So it was sad to see what happened to him because he was eliminated by rope on February 21st, 1803. And his head was separated from his body and held up by the executioner as he exclaimed, "This is the head of a traitor, Edward Marcus Despard." Records report over 20,000 people gathered to see his execution, not because they didn't believe in what he was speaking about, but because they were standing in solidarity with him. And after his execution, they all walked away in silence I believe, to signify the fact that this was the government trying to keep them silent. It didn't work. All the fighting that happened after that and wars, so it didn't work. But this was just a powerful story during the 1800s. And to see this mixed race couple standing together, fighting together for free speech, was something powerful to see. Report said that she helped him write the words that he spoke right before his elimination. And he said, even though he was innocent, quote, "Yet they avail themselves of a legal pretext to destroy a man because he has been a friend to truth, to liberty, and to justice," unquote. After his death, Catherine was cared for by Sir Francis Burdett. He was a military MP, and he had worked with and been in the military with her husband, and they gave her a pension. And then even Horatio Nelson's wife, Lady Nelson, and Horatio protected Catherine. So they stepped up for their friend in his absence and really took care of his wife. And she died in Somerstown, London in 1815. What a woman. What a man. I mean, the story is just amazing. And if you want to see more of it, they have a show. It's a series, and it's called Poldarks. And Karen McLean is actually playing Catherine Despard. So if you want to see more of that story, definitely tune in to see that show. What did you think about today's episode? I hope that you enjoyed it. You learned something about someone you never knew and about the price that people paid to have the right to speak, to stand up for labor, to help one another and help their community. This has been a wonderful story. Look up Catherine Despard, learn more about her in my book, Royal, Black, and Elite. And as always, thank you for tuning in, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And don't forget, I'll see you in another great episode.